Today's forum is part of a program tracking what we're calling the Education Equation. It's being sponsored by Columbus State Community College, represented by the Chief of Staff of Columbus State Community College, Kim Hall, and her colleagues, and Columbus State Community College Foundation, represented by Pam Bishop and her colleagues. Please thank them for their support of today's event. Now I'd like to welcome Kim to the microphone to introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Good afternoon and welcome. Columbus State and the Columbus State Development Foundation are delighted to sponsor today's forum, and we're especially excited to partner with the Columbus Metropolitan Club to sponsor education forums here for the next 12 months. We are seeing unprecedented collaboration among leaders in K-12 education, higher education, and the business community. And it is extremely encouraging to witness this community emerge as a national leader in building a cohesive regional strategy towards college completion and career success. We are honored today to have 4 distinguished guests with us to further the dialogue. A biography for each speaker is in your forum flyer, and so I will provide only brief introductions. Our first panelist has had a long and successful career of service and leadership in Columbus as Columbus City Attorney and as a Franklin County Municipal Court Judge. Since 2003, she has served as President and CEO of United Way of Central Ohio. Please welcome Janet Jackson. Our second panelist has also held key positions in public service as the Chancellor for the Board of Regents and State Senator for Ohio's 25th State Senate District. He is presently the Vice President for Education and STEM Learning at Battelle, and he serves as the Director of the Columbus Education Commission. Please welcome Eric Fingerhut. Our third panelist is the founding pastor of the Church for All People, located on the south side of Columbus, and he's also the director of the Community Development for All People nonprofit faith-based organization. He has led a diverse congregation at the Church for All People, including individuals who most desperately need the support of our community. Please welcome Pastor John Edgar. And finally, our moderator studies many of the complex issues we'll be discussing today and at future forums. She is the Executive Director of the nationally renowned Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at OSU. Please welcome Sharon Davies. On behalf of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, Columbus State Community College, and the Columbus State Community College Development Foundation, thank you so much again for coming. And at this time, I'll turn the mic over to Janet.
Good afternoon. Oh, that's weak. Good afternoon. I was just explaining to a couple of folks who were trying to understand my stamina that I'm sure it goes back to my roots of growing up in the South and on a farm. And in the South, we are always about greeting folks, and so I'm afraid that's just part of who I am. Thank you, Kim, for the introduction, and thank you to Columbus State Community College for supporting the work of the Metropolitan Club and for sponsoring us today. And thank you for having us back to share this information with you today. In order to fully understand the state of education in our community and how to effectively improve it, we must understand the factors and history that have created the current conditions. And one of those most significant factors would be our neighborhoods. This is the focus of the 2013 Franklin County Children's Report, Why Neighborhoods Matter to Education. Developed by the United Way's Champion of Children, thank you, Linda Cass, and all of United Way, and the Kirwan Institute for Race and Ethnicity and Community Research Partners, and congratulations to their new exec. Thank you for coming together for this organization. And I have to say a really special thank you to the Kirwan Institute and the Sharon Davies. We have found a new wonderful partner in our work. So the report looks at key decisions over the past several decades that have had tremendous effects on neighborhoods and schools. It explores some neighborhood revitalization efforts in at-risk neighborhoods here in Central Ohio. It also illustrates that safe, vibrant neighborhoods and high-quality education are strongly linked. The report shows the power of holistic approach to education, and the best national example of that is the Harlem Children's Zone. Much can be learned from the Harlem Children's Zone, and we were extremely fortunate to have heard directly from Jeffrey Canada, its president, in February at the 20th anniversary of Champion of Children. I see a number of people here today that were among the audience of more than 600 individuals who attended that event. Taking the time to understand all aspects of our children's education and taking a holistic approach to improving it was the idea behind Mayor Coleman's and City Council President Andy Ginther's Columbus Education Commission. I was extremely proud to serve on the commission, and we were so fortunate to have its director, Eric Fingerhut, both serving as the director and serving on our panel today. You need to give him a round of applause. As you know, the Commission's recommendations have now been made, and it is time for our community to come together and implement them. And I don't know if Eric was going to share this during the Q&A, and so if you've got something to write something down, you can go online and get the report and read it. And I really, really, really encourage you to do it. It's not overwhelming unless you look at all of the things in the appendix. You go to Reimagine Columbus Education. Reimagine ColumbusEducation.org. Please take the time to do it. If you're like me, you're going to have to download it so you can mark it up, but it is worth your time to do that. So as we go about implementing it, the report, the recommendations, we must understand the dynamics of where we are today and the best practices that already exist. So that's why I believe that the Franklin County Children's Report is the perfect companion piece to the Commission's recommendation. And so again, I think today you're just going to receive the executive summary of the report, but again, you can go online and get the entire report. It may not, I don't know if you want it as bedtime reading, but please read the two, reports. It's really, really important for the future of our children. Because I believe that taken together, these two important documents tell us very clearly where we have been and where our community needs to go to ensure that every child, and I do mean every child in Central Ohio, gets a high-quality education that gives them the opportunities they need to reach their potential. Let me give you a little bit of a warning about our report and maybe a little bit from the education report. I was reading our full report just last night, and you're going to see a lot of information in that report about the current status of our children as it relates to the issue of poverty. Do not become overwhelmed by those numbers. Poverty is simply not an excuse for our children not succeeding in school. We have example after example. So we're providing you the data that you need to know. You need to understand the challenges that we have before us, but again, it's not an excuse. So I'll end by telling you that even though we have a lot of work to do to improve education, I have never been more hopeful. Through my participation on the Columbus Education Commission, and I certainly hope to be a part of the implementation of the recommendations, and in my role as President and CEO of the United Way of Central Ohio, I see that our community has the will to come together and to improve our schools. As we have proven time and time again, Central Ohio is a community that gets things done. And I believe we are now determined to ensure that the education our children receive is among the best in the country. So now I am pleased to turn the podium over to our moderator, Sharon Davies, Executive Director of the Kirtland Institute.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have the easiest job of the group. I only have to moderate this wonderful conversation that we can have here today. I have the unenviable task, though, of keeping us on time, because I've been told that we want to leave about 15 minutes for questions from the room, and so we will talk amongst ourselves for about 30 minutes until 1 o'clock, and then we'll open it up for discussion. The Children's Report is an important community gift, really, as was the visit of Jeff Canada, who was brought to Columbus, and so many of you wonderfully had an opportunity to see him when he was here in February, brought here by United Way and The Ohio State University. One of the things that Jeff Canada really stressed that has stayed in my mind since he was here is that this is actually not rocket science. This is actually something that we know how to do. And in fact, if we just look at the children in our community who are thriving, and we look at what it is that surrounds their lives that enables them to thrive in the way in which they do, in the way in which we want all of our children from Franklin County to thrive, we can see the components of that. At the Kirwan Institute, we talk about that in structural terms. We refer to the structures that surround each and all of our lives, particularly when we are children, as being enormously important to either opening up pathways to opportunity or creating impediments to opportunity. Some of us are tremendously fortunate to be surrounded by opportunity structures that are operating in a way that really help us to succeed or move towards success in life. And so when you think about that structurally, what we're talking about are structures like high-performing schools or low-performing schools, the importance of access to healthcare facilities while you're a child and health may be impacting your household in one way or the other, the importance of safe streets outside of your home, safe parks or playgrounds for you to play in, or the devastating impact that unsafe streets or unsafe playgrounds can actually have on one's ability just to get exercise or make one's way from your home to your school. The importance of stable and affordable housing. Stable so that if your housing is stable, you can be stably connected to a school nearby, hopefully one that is high performing. But we know that we are not evenly distributed or situated among this web of structures that are so important to life success. So this is why I was so excited to be able to be involved with United Way this year when United Way decided to focus on the important link between neighborhoods and communities and academic outcomes and academic success. And that is really a synopsis of the focus of this year's report. So Gina, I really wanted to start with you and to have you talk to us a little bit more about this link and how it is that you see not just the importance of schools and what's happening within the school system itself, the four walls, but what's happening outside of those four walls that makes such an impact on young children's lives.
He's not in the room today, but I have to give credit to a board member who just left us in March, Tony White. Many of you may remember him as a former OSU basketball player, and I think he still does commentary. And currently he's the managing partner of Thompson Hine. When our board was trying to decide on our bold goals back in 08, 09, Tony was the board member who spoke so eloquently on the importance of including home as one of our four impact areas. He made it, he was wonderful, and we are probably the only United Way in the country that has this particular piece carved out. But Tony shared with us, you know, we can afford children the best early childhood education. We can make sure that they're healthy. We can really work on ensuring that their parents make enough money for decent living. But if they can't come home to a structure that itself is safe and sound. The actual building, the quality of where they stay, and the issues that are there, whether it's lead or other things. And if they don't have the ability to come out to their street, to their backyards, to go into their playgrounds, they simply will not thrive. It has to be one of those critical pieces. And so our work is around trying to ensure, and it's rather daunting work, because I don't know if we've counted how many neighborhoods need the type of interventions that we've had at Wineland Park, or now as we move to the south side. And I'm having some conversations with folks in the room and partnering, of course, with OSU and the PAC on the Near East side. Unfortunately, we have many communities in Columbus where children don't have the ability to do exactly as what I just said. But it's a fundamental right that every child, has, and we're getting it right. I mean, again, if you look at what's going on in Wineland Park, there are so many partners that are there. I would remind you that not so many years ago, Wineland Park was neighborhood to the Short North Posse, the most notorious drug gang. But when you look at whether it's Godmanville, the Settlement House, and OSU, and so many other folks, and most importantly, including the individuals who live in the neighborhood, including the parents. This is not a situation where we can just come in and say, we're going to fix it for you. They must be there. And we also must make sure that when we go through this revitalization of a neighborhood, that those residents can stay. This is not a situation where we're going to push them out. And so it's just critical, again, to, so when you read the report, I mean, look at those poverty numbers and look at what those children have to face, and then say, one way we're going to address that is to very systematically, neighborhood by neighborhood, revitalize them.
Okay, so when I think about what Janet has just said, it occurs to me that what she's describing and what we can see from the historical sketch that is involved in the full-blown report that was generated this year is that communities and neighborhoods are dynamic. They change, and they sometimes change in ways that improve them, but also displace people who would benefit from those improvements, including children, if we could just create the kinds of interventions that would allow those families to be stably located in improving neighborhoods. So it's a big part of what United Way is focused on with the Wineland Park work that is going on now. And Reverend, I want to come to you because you are also doing real hands-on, and I would describe it as holistic work with residents of the South Side, and ask you to help us understand this a little bit better and why it's so important to think about this holistically and not just as what is happening within the four walls of a school building.
Sure. The good news is, as already been indicated, is there are some great examples right now across Columbus of revitalization efforts that are working. A lot of attention being given to Wineland Park, you've alluded to. And there are two of these initiatives right now going on the south side of Columbus that are trying to take the best practices that have been emerging. One of those is an initiative that's just to the south of Nationwide Children's Hospital called Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families, that the hospital has been the key anchor institution to promote. And based largely on the success of that venture in Wineland Park, there's now a second initiative, what's known as the Southern Gateway Collaborative, that Mayor Coleman's championed after the close of the Southside Settlement House, where the United Way and others have been key players. But in response to your question, if you look at those two illustrations, along with Wineland Park, there's some things that stand out very clearly. One is that they all focus on very clearly defined geographical areas. The Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families area is just 31 square blocks. The Southern Gateway Initiative is just 50 square blocks. So it's very precise geography, but then it's a very broad range of services, as the other folks have already alluded to. Yes, it is what happens in the schools, that does matter, but alongside that, housing is a key component. And so, for example, with the Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families Initiative, there are about 400 homes in that total area. And when we got started, a partnership between the nonprofit I run and Nationwide Children's Hospital with United Way, City of Columbus, what we said was we wanted to acquire and redevelop every single vacant blighted property in the community. And at that time, about 1 out of every 4 homes was vacant and blighted. So we went to work, and now, just 4 years later, we're at a place where the vacancy rate has been cut by, at this point, just over 50%, which is actually the bold goal that was established by United Way. And at the same time that was going on, there was a decision to help existing homeowners. Because a lot of these folks had hung in during very difficult times, and so grants have been made now to about 50 homeowners to help them improve their properties. And so we get a sense where the whole neighborhood looks better, there's less blight, and it makes it more walkable, it makes it a place where neighbors are more likely to come out onto their front porches. And all of that's happening, and as the report indicates, because there's what the report calls collaborative reinvestment, this notion that no one entity can do it all. So in the case of Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families, it is Nationwide Children's Hospital that clearly has taken the lead, but then that became a trigger for the United Way to pick this as a target neighborhood in its new initiative on housing. The city of Columbus was remarkable in a variety of ways. And so those partners on housing kept things going. But it doesn't even stop there. In that particular initiative, Nationwide Children's Hospital has more than 100 employees who are mentoring students right now at the Lincoln Elementary School that's in this target area. In fact, the school was selected as the epicenter. When we did the very first houses, we did the blocks right around the school and then radiated outward from there. And as all that was going on, there's an emphasis on health and wellness, the notion that if people don't have jobs, then stability is also shattered. And so all these parts came together to make this work. And now it's being replicated in this second target neighborhood known as the Southern Gateway. And what's fascinating to me about this second area is that along with all these other folks in terms of collaborative reinvestment, we're now seeing people who grew up on the South Side, have been very successful in their business careers, and deciding that they are determined to improve quality of life on the very streets where they grew up. And so there are folks like the Grody family, and Jane Grody-Abel's here today, and Don Kelly, and Tanny Crane. And they are literally investing millions of their own dollars alongside the United Way that was a lot of the inspiration for drawing them in. And then the city of Columbus and others. And a flagship in this, as just one additional illustration, is what's known as the Reeb Community Center. The elementary school in that neighborhood closed a number of years ago, the Reeb School, and there are references to that in this report as well, that trend. But there was a decision after the Southside Settlement House closed and collapsed a lot of the basic human services in that neighborhood to regroup. And so private donors and the city are pooling about half and half, $5 million each roughly, to redo this building as a community center that will have as its foundation early childhood education with the Southside Learning and Development Center, will include job training and readiness, and also provide direct services as basic as a daily lunch program so that we begin to meet these various needs. And then one other thing that I would mention, I believe there's a unique role in all of this type of initiative for very grassroots organizations, neighborhood associations, the traditional civics, but also faith-based groups and others, such as the one that I run. Because it is ultimately about building trust with the people who are already there. We began 14 years ago on the South Side just providing direct services to very poor individuals. We see more than 25,000 different low-income folks every year come through our doors. And over the time, just staying and building relationships, there's now trust that we can reach out and do these other things. And that allows it all to work together. And then the point that each of you already made, that I think the report highlights and that we just have to own, is we can deceive ourselves and say we won when a neighborhood looks better. But if all we did was gentrify the neighborhood, and if we really, in the process of making it better so that the children there would have a safe neighborhood and all the rest, but in the process we drove those kids out of the neighborhood, then we have actually taken a step back rather than a step forward. And to me, what is worth celebrating as much as anything else is this report names that truth. And now that we've named it, we can face it. And things such as what Nationwide Children's Hospital and these donors are doing are committed to keep the folks there that serve the kids that need it most.
Sharon, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
And this is just around empowering the residents. So this is something you may not know that, in a way, United Way has been doing for years. We have a neighborhood partnership center where we've been teaching classes on important skills to residents for years. But just this last year, we created the Neighborhood Leadership Academy and just graduated their first class. So these are folks who live in the neighborhoods that we're talking about. And it's really in-depth training for them that teaches them the key skills that they need to identify and to map community assets and to manage projects. It creates connections between the leaders. And so many times those individuals have been sort of overlooked, but they're there. They are this generation of leaders for the communities, and the next. But sometimes they just, again, they need that basic skill development or training. I personally went to the graduation this year. It was awesome. These are folks who are ready to go back to these neighborhoods and to use that skill, and they're staying there.
And so we can clearly get a sense of the depth of the community commitment that is here that we can tap into, and that is so important. But, you know, when I hear, Janet, you saying things to the crowd like, don't get overwhelmed by the poverty numbers, or my conversation with you, Eric, before we began, and you talking to me about the reality of the grim statistics that we're talking about, and you, Reverend Edgar, to talk about how we needed to start small and then radiate outward. This sounds really big. And the word holistic, too, that whole approach makes it feel like what we are talking about is an enormous endeavor. One of the things that struck me when Jeff Canada was here, when he was talking about the complexity, really, of the effort that we are talking about, was that what we don't fully appreciate is we don't appreciate how much we're investing right now, only we're investing in failure, rather investing in pathways to success. So Eric, I want to bring you into this conversation, having just directed the work of the Education Commission, to speak a little bit about your experience with that and some of the most important takeaways that we should be thinking about right now.
Well, thank you, Sharon. And Janet, thank you for your service on the commission for this incredibly timely report. And don't worry, you're not off the hook on implementation. You're going to be right at the table. And I also want to really acknowledge and thank both Mayor Coleman and Council President Andy Ginther. Andy's here today for their extraordinary leadership. This was not just them creating a commission and then walking away from it and waiting for a report. They've been deeply engaged in this from day one, and they, of course, remain deeply engaged in the implementation. So please, let's share our thanks for the Council President. So one of the things that Mayor Coleman said during the course of the commission work, which took me a little bit by surprise because I haven't lived in Columbus my whole life, as you know, is he said that the public outreach effort that the commission conducted was the single largest effort that he's organized on any issue since he's been mayor. That public outreach effort, which was led by Kathleen Murphy, who's here, included public meetings, open meetings, focus groups, social media, websites, Twitter feeds, 100,000 postcards that we placed all around the community, ads encouraging people to send us their ideas, the website that Janet mentioned earlier. And out of all that, Sharon, I have to tell you that the number one piece of public input was, we want you to strengthen schools in our neighborhoods. It was the link between education and the neighborhoods. So the topic of this report, Janet, is something that the people of this community already get. They get the link between a high-quality school and a high-quality neighborhood. And I just want to share with you, because you can read this yourself, but page 52 of the report says, we're talking about creating quality schools. It says, while more high-quality school choices are important, parents in Columbus rightly demand more, not deserve, demand more. They want a high-performing school for their children in their neighborhood. When children are able to attend school closer to home, it's easier for them to build friendships in the neighborhood, which contributes to community safety and well-being, improving housing values and the attractiveness of the neighborhood. It's also easier for parents to be involved in their neighborhood school. You hear about parent involvement. We're sending how parents can be involved when their kids are in 6 different schools that are, in entirely different directions, and they're working, from 7 in the morning till 5 at night. So this was something that was really brought home to the commission. Now, how did we address it? I'm going to mention 5 things quickly. Don't be daunted by 5. I promise it'll be quick. First of all, we also say in the report, on the next page, one of the most noteworthy developments during the commission was the commitment and energy of parent-led, neighborhood-based organizations advocating for improvements in their neighborhood schools. If you're paying attention, all over this community, groups like Clintonville Go Public, Southside Stay, Northwest Stars, Linden, they're popping up, these parent organizations that are advocating for better schools. So one thing the report does is recommend, you'll hear more later about a public-private partnership, a new organization, Think Columbus 2020 for Education. And one of the jobs of that organization is going to be to support those groups and help create those groups in neighborhoods that don't have them forming indigenously, so that there's a neighborhood voice on their school. And that leads to number 2, which is a central theme of the report, is that the decision about schools has to be made at the school level. The one thing we've learned across the country is that school quality is at the school level. The principal leadership, the pedagogical design, the theme of the school, and it has to be tied in to that neighborhood. So we've recommended a pretty sweeping decentralization of the Columbus City School District so that the principals and the teachers in the school can interact with the neighborhood in building the school that they desire in their community. Third, a strong emphasis on the need to make sure students are not just college ready, but also career ready, and to understand what the jobs that are coming in this community. Columbus is growing economically. We're creating more jobs in Central Ohio than in any community in the state. What a tragedy if our children growing up in Columbus can't access those jobs, can't participate in them, not just because they don't have the training, but they don't have even the vision to understand what those careers are. They don't know what the jobs are at Nationwide Children's Hospital, Steve, or other positions. So we've recommended that in each neighborhood, not at a career academy that you leave the neighborhood to go to, but in each neighborhood there be career-focused education and training. And our friends at Columbus State, led by President Harrison, who are our host today, have committed to being leaders in helping us develop those career pathways in every neighborhood. Fourth, it is critical, if you're talking about neighborhoods, that the city and the schools be working together. If you know this community, you understand that sometime years ago, somebody understood the connection between schools and neighborhoods, because our schools are built around parks. And every place you go, there's opportunity to think holistically about parks and recreation and schools. But then at some point, we lost sight of that connection. And so the mayor's committed to creating in his cabinet a director of educational improvement. And we've recommended that that person be an ex officio member of the school board, sit at the school board meetings, work with the school board on a day-to-day basis. So never again in this community should we have a situation where the school board doesn't know what the mayor's thinking, the mayor doesn't know what's going on at the school board, and they're not working together to plan these schools and these neighborhoods that matter. And then lastly, and this is the most controversial, and I told Sharon this at lunch, when Jeff Canada was here, and she so skillfully moderated one of the sessions with Jeff Canada, she asked him a question that Jeff Canada said it was the first time he's ever been asked that question. And you know how many times Jeff Canada's been interviewed. So that's a pretty high compliment to Sharon. The question was, when you started the Harlem Children's Zone, you didn't think about running schools. You were thinking about social services and the safety and police and all those kinds of things of a community. How did you get there? And consolidating a very brilliant long answer to a short synopsis, he said, we tried to work with our local school district and told them what we needed in our neighborhood. They were not responsive, and so unfortunately, even the head of the school district, who at that time was Joel Klein in the New York City schools, said, you've got to build it yourself, and handed Jeff Canada a charter. Now, we tend to think of charters either we think of them negatively because there's been a lot of negative discussion of charters, or we think of them as sort of magnets that pull kids out of neighborhoods. But the Harlem Children's Zone showed that a charter school can be an anchor of a neighborhood. And the research, friends, is somewhat daunting on the turnaround of failing traditional public schools. It can happen, but it does not happen all the time. And when you've got a school that's been failing in a neighborhood for a decade or more, bringing in a high-performing charter can also be an important option for that neighborhood. And so the commission also is creating a number of mechanisms, including asking the city to charter schools so that it has the imprimatur of the city. It's got the quality and the good housekeeping seal of approval, and it's located in a place that the council president and the mayor say we need. It's an additional option that will help strengthen the neighborhoods in this community when we can't see a quick path to the turnaround of our traditional public school in that neighborhood.
Well, thank you for that, Eric, and I wanted to let you finish your 5 points because I knew where you were headed and how important each one of those is for us to be thinking about. I failed in my effort to keep us to 1 o'clock to open this up, but it's now 1:03 by my clock up here, and so I do want to open it up. It's an impossible task to have a conversation as rich as the one that we would like to have with these 3 individuals up here at the table, but I'm sure there are folks in the room who would like to ask some questions in response or reaction to what it is that you've heard so far. So if you'd like to do that, please just line up at the microphone.
And before Mark asks his first question, if I could add to Eric's comments, there's one piece, and I'm not sure on what page it is, but you know, in this community over the last, I don't know if it's 10 or 15 years, we've invested millions and millions of dollars to either building new schools or renovating schools. I don't think that it's finished yet. And unfortunately, most of those buildings are open from 8 or 8:30 in the morning until 3 o'clock. There's a recommendation in the report, and I'm not talking about all 120 schools, but as we work with certain neighborhoods, those buildings should become community centers. They should be open until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, not only for programming for children, but also for the parents. So you talk about what a parent engagement, open them when they can come there. So don't know how that's going to work. It may come under this public-private partnership.
Page 72.
Page 72, when you read the report. Because I think that when we look at neighborhoods, we can in every neighborhood find a and renovate it, but we've got buildings that are already there, and they belong to us.
Mark.
I would be curious in what the panelists thought about this report and what most surprised you about it.
Well, I would begin that I think it's an amazingly good report. I mentioned that to several of the folks who had been involved in writing it. What struck me, Mark, is that it is very honest about the past and what has contributed, both good and bad, to where we find ourselves. And while it doesn't rant or get angry, it does push us to say that we have to look below the veneer of a revitalized community. We really have to ask ourselves, when we improved a neighborhood, whether it's German Village or whether it's Old Orchards or Wyland Park, did we help the people who were there the day we began, or are those people now gone, pushed somewhere else? Churn is one of the terms for when our kids just keep moving from school to school, and if revitalization adds to churn, then shame on us. But even more, if revitalization hides the fact that we haven't really helped the kids that were there to begin with, then shame on us. The good news is, I think we are much more aware of that than we've ever been before, and I'm convinced that the initiatives that I'm part of on the South Side, what I know about Wyland Park, we are determined to do it better, and that's part of the gift of Jeffrey Canada to us. We can help the kids who are here. We don't have to hide behind a veneer that we made it look better, but we push the families out. So to me, that's one of the single most important things in the report.
So I'll say, first of all, I need to say that Mark Reel is as much an author of the Columbus Education Commission report as anybody, and his organization, Kids Ohio, deserves enormous thanks from this community for their leadership. They put everything aside. They put everything aside to help us. I am so encouraged. My take on the report was, Reverend Edgar mentioned this before, I'm so encouraged by the positive examples that can be built on. It was either Janet or Sharon who said earlier that with respect to schools, the same thing is the case. We're doing it. We are doing it here in high poverty areas, in challenging neighborhoods around Central Ohio, not all in the Columbus City School Districts, in southwestern schools. If you haven't been to North Franklin Elementary School, you ought to go. In Reynoldsburg, which is scoring 26 out of 26 on state report cards, in charter schools like KIPP and others that are represented here, we're doing it. And so what we have to do is believe we can do it, and be honest about the places where we're failing, so that we can turn to the models that are in fact working and expand them and take them to scale. But I'm encouraged that in the neighborhood side of the work, we also have successful models to build on. Success breeds success, and this is a positive community moving in the right direction.
I would absolutely agree with Reverend Edgar that the call out around the potential for gentrification, moving folks out. And I'm not sure if it's in here as clearly as we would like, but hopefully when you read the report, you will see yourself as a person, an individual, helping with the solutions. So for me, it's this call out for more parent engagement, and it's really a call out for individuals just like you to become involved in this work, in the neighborhoods, with parents, with children. We have to go beyond the institutions. This has to be a call to action for the entire community. And I don't know, it doesn't make a difference where you live or where you work. You need to be a part of turning this massive ship around when it comes to ensuring that our children will succeed.
You have another question?
Hello, my name is Deb Barker. My question is, and it may be too soon to have the data, but I wonder if there's any data that that says what the improvement in attendance and grades are since all of this has been implemented.
Well, I'm not sure we've implemented everything yet. I mean, this is the point. I can tell you that I know in Columbus City Schools, there's this early warning system. Is that mine? Okay, all right. I have that ringtone, and the purse is down there, so that we can actually, follow. But I will say this: I think that in our systems now, both as a recommendation coming out of the commission, what is already going on with the district, we lead an early childhood piece of work called Columbus Kids. We are absolutely beginning to measure and track. So we're not going to rely on anecdotal, how do we feel, those warm and fuzzy feelings. We will absolutely have the data going forth in this community to see if we are getting the improvements with our children. I mean, the numbers, are shocking when it comes to our kids. There are many of them. When Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education, was here to meet with us, the one that maybe I hadn't read it before, but he talked about the number of students entering high school in Columbus City Schools. 6,000 entering. How many actually graduating in 4 years? Now understand, some have moved to charters, some have maybe moved to suburban districts, but in the 4 years, 2,800. 2,800, over half. And so we still need to be motivated, but data will be important, and the use of data as we move forward.
And I'd just add to that quickly that the good news in education in the last 10 years is there's been a revolution in data. And so we have a much better capacity to track and to compare. I won't bore you with some of the data right now, or the depressing stuff Sharon and I were talking about at lunch. But you will see from education, as well as from the social services side, a consistent commitment to data reporting and accountability.
I think we have time for, I'm sorry.
I was just to say, in the neighborhoods that we've been talking about where revitalization is going on, there is data that there are measurable improvements. Lincoln Park Elementary, for example, went from academic emergency up 2 levels to continuous improvement, and in part because of an after-school program funded by United Way that we run. There's now Children's Defense Fund Freedom School there, and likewise in the Livingston Elementary. The test scores are improving. As I said before, we actually know what to do. We just have to go and do it. And so there's early evidence that what may even seem like fairly modest efforts begin to build momentum, and it is measurable.
For primarily Janet and John, no offense, Eric, but a Columbus question. So in next steps, in Columbus, my observation is we have turned over a lot of our governance in the neighborhoods to a variety of commissions. And many issues are dealt with or funneled to commissions. And I would say that has contributed to exclusion and gentrification as much as anything else. How do we reboot that system and process as a community so that as the community moves forward with this vision, that the commissions follow along and not act to be the excluding factor as well?
Mary Jo, I'm now trying to recall from my days as the city attorney, various commissions around the community. I would say, though, that in the neighborhoods that we're talking about, at this particular time, we don't have those commissions that have gotten to that point of being exclusive, so potentially a German village or Victorian village. So I would go back to what I said earlier about the work that we're doing around the leaders of the people who live in these areas right now. Not the folks who are going to move in and want to push gentrification. So to identify those individuals and to work with them to fight for their neighborhoods, right now, I think that's different than some of the other communities where when people moved in. That's the first thing that I would say around it. Reverend?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think it is an interesting challenge. And I agree with Janet that on the south side, the neighborhood civics and the area commission that's fairly new, they're not made up of people that are all very wealthy. But what we do see, and is very problematic, is it tends to attract homeowners and long-term residents. And the families that this report's talking about that are most vulnerable tend to not be the folks that show up to civic associations. It is a key issue. It's actually one of the challenges right now with the Southern Gateway Initiative as people are trying to gather information. And once more, it's not so much about being critical, it's certainly not criticizing the people who do come, but it's owning the challenge and say, so how do we do it different? And so we need to look at what are the cultural differences, and to say we want committee structures and formal votes and the rest of this stuff and minutes from the last meeting may not be the best way to energize a family after a single parent's been working all day long to come out. So some of the other things Janet's talking about let's make the school community centers, let's get the kids with their parents there. We need different styles of generating authentic investment and not rely on one very middle-class, very bureaucratic arrangement. We shouldn't do away with the area commissions of the civics, but we got to own the fact that's not enough if we're going to reach the kids and the families that this is talking about.
And one of the things that we have to really understand about our community is how it is changing so rapidly when it comes to diversity. So I'm going to look at Kathleen. For children under the age of 6 living in Franklin County now, 50% of them are now children of color. Now, children 6 and under, 50% children of color. So you look around this room, it's not this room, but it truly is the future of Columbus. And I'm not so sure that we've actually called out at United Way and other reports. As a community, we're probably going to need to do some additional work when it comes to cultural diversity and inclusion with neighborhoods and that kind of training, because our community is in fact changing.
I appreciate that point. So if it's 1:16, and I have to sum up. If I did that, I would say that one thing that strikes me about this conversation is how much emphasis was put on two different sides. One is the community's involvement as a whole in attending to the issues that really confront so many of our children here in Franklin County. And the other is a recognition that has to involve the families and the communities themselves. And that, I think, is a very, very much akin to what has made the Harlem Children's Zone so successful. One of the things that the zone did from the very beginning was it issued the promise, and it's literally called that, the promise. And the promise is that to every family that commits to becoming a part or a member of this Harlem Children's Zone, the promise is that the zone itself will see their children through all the way through high school graduation. It's a big promise. But it's one that I think that would be wonderful for us to be able to emulate here in Columbus and Franklin County. So please join me in thanking our panelists.
You know, I'm sure I speak for the crowd when I say it's exciting. The energy and the passion is almost palpable. We'd love to have you come back in about 6 months and tell us what's going on, how we're proceeding from this point to keep this momentum going. So thank you. I'm sure all of you enjoyed today's forum. You can share it and see it again on YouTube. There's a link on our website. You can pass it on to other folks. Sorry, there are no cookies today. I had to tell you that. Before you leave, please drop off your name badges because we're also green. If you want to get on our email blast, put a card in the back. Let's make reservations for next week. Downtown Playground, abandonment to attraction, and don't forget to make the reservation for June 6th. It's a heck of a party. Please come. Thank you for Columbus State Community College and the foundation. Thank you, Janet, Eric, Edgar, and Sharon very much. Thank you.